Deputy Thomas Pringle, and the Deputy is 10 minutes.
Thanks, Cahirlock. Cahirlock, this government's budgetary strategy continues to prioritise high earners and industry at the expense of vulnerable people, people on low incomes and those on social welfare. Despite a few relatively positive initiatives in the bill, such as the increase in the home care tax credit, the fuel grant for disabled drivers, country-by-country reports on parent companies filing their tax returns, there is actually very little in the bill that attempts to reform our current tax system and to make it more reflective of a fairer, more equal society. But I would be naive to think that this would ever be Fine Gael and Labour's way anyway. I do, however, want to counter the argument that this bill is a progressive one. I will start with the notion that the new petroleum production tax is a progressive measure, when in actual fact the government took the option that affected industry the least. I sat on the joint Oireachtas Committee on Communications, Natural Resources and Agriculture that published the report on oil and gas exploration in 2012, which recommended that on smaller scale petroleum fields the tax should be 40%. The government proposes 30% in the finance bill. This has given effect to a decision that was made by the former Minister for Energy and Natural Resources last year. And that 30% is 10% less than the recommendations of the Joint Committee. But worse still, the report recommended that for large profitable fields, the tax should be 80%. But Minister Noonan in his bill sets a maximum tax on productive fields at 55%. It would not be fitting to call this a progressive tax, as it is far removed from the committee recommendations, whose rates were also in line with the Indecon report findings. It is also a perfect example of the government's loyalty ultimately to lying with industry and compromising their policies to kowtow to their needs. Another anomaly in the bill is in relation to the annual stamp duty charge of $2.50 on ATM and debit cards, which has been abolished from the 1st of January 2016 and will be replaced with a new 12-cent ATM withdrawal fee from the 1st of January. And this might seem progressive, but however, it will impact most on those that do their business through cash transactions, and attack vital services like our post office as well, who work mainly on cash transactions also. But what we should be doing in the finance bill is making it cheaper for retailers to do their business, and there should be incentives to support post offices along with the introduction of this measure. That would show that this government is serious about economic recovery across rural Ireland. Most of the supports and tax benefits in the bill are orientated towards the tech giants who get preferential treatment for bringing in the jobs and putting Ireland on the global tech map. I want to ask the Minister, when will we see progressive policies to bring about indigenous industries that don't end up getting bought out or exported? Fostering local industries and alternative industries like biomass and renewable productions have potential to grow local, sustainable and rural jobs. They foster companies that could be established in peripheral counties like Donegal and along the western seaboard. And the introduction of the tax exemption for the felling of trees will actually benefit larger operators more so than the family farmers who are in the forestry industry. A first step could have been the introduction of a measure of this bill that would prioritise the rollout of broadband to rural peripheral areas, working its way from rural areas into urban areas, offering scope for people to develop and grow their own jobs and grow their own businesses. The impact that broadband connectivity could have on the growth of SMEs and startups in rural constituencies like Donegal and across the country is huge. Recently, ISME published statistics that 14% of SMEs are currently capable of fully trading online, only 14%, while a further 8% can take orders but are not able to take payments online. This presents small businesses and potential startups with a disadvantage and should have been reflected in this legislation. The introduction of the initiatives such as the Knowledge Development Box, providing for a 6.25% rate of corporation tax for multinationals who avail of this development box, is basically another way of assisting them to avoid tax and to avoid paying their fair share. We could have seen in this bill a measure to introduce a minimum effective tax rate of corporation tax across the economy, and even by setting the minimum effective tax rate of 6% on corporations, which is less than half of the headline figure of 12.5%, it would bring in an extra €1 billion into the exchequer, and that is something that could be used to the advantage of many people right across the country. On a separate issue, There is the issue in relation to capital gains tax for farmers who have their land purchased by compulsory purchase orders. And I would ask the Minister to consider exempting the purchase of land through compulsory purchase orders from capital gains tax. Because in these cases, the farmers aren't looking to gain on the asset that they have. The asset has been taken from them without their consent and been compulsory purchased for vital infrastructure projects, there's no doubt, like road developments. But I don't believe that farmers should be penalised by having the capital gains tax levied on the income from the compulsory purchase orders. It's different when somebody sells an asset to profit from it, and it should then fall on a tax liability. I was also hoping that the Minister would take the opportunity to allow for, and this is an issue that really probably only affects along the border mainly, but where separated couples, where one partner who maybe has custody most of the time of the children lives in the 6 counties, and the other partner is in the south and has access to the children, they are not able to avail of the single person tax credit, and I think that's something that should have been looked at in this bill and dealt with. It doesn't affect a huge amount of people, but for the people that it does affect, it actually makes a big impact on their ability to support their children as well when they're living outside the state. Beyond the packages outlined in the finance bill, I believe the government has missed an opportunity to present a more progressive stance on areas of taxation and regional development. And while the reduction of the USC increase in tax credit to €13,000, that actually means that 700,000 people are taken out completely out of the USC tax net. And while that is good for them, it actually shows that we are focused on a low-pay economy in the state. 700,000 workers represents about 35% of the entire workforce. And I think that signifies the low-income focus of this government and the low-pay focus, particularly for people who are struggling. So instead of finding quality jobs for people to work in and making the transition for people to get that work easier, the government subsidises low-income jobs, and this highlights the fact that we're developing into a low-pay economy, and for rural areas like Donegal, it means that we will continue to remain with incomes well below the national average. I don't believe that this is progressive, but I suppose we shouldn't really have expected anything better from the current government.